Worst prison food in San Quentin, exposed inside California's Notorious prison. The stench from H Block. If you think justice ends at the prison gate, you've never stepped inside San Quentin's kitchen. Subscribe, because what you're about to hear was never meant to leave those walls. The smell hit before the gates even closed. A thick, greasy fog of spoiled meat and something metallic, like rusted pipes soaked in vinegar, hung in the air. Officer David Larkin swore it was the smell of old death. He'd worked in San Quentin for 15 years, seen riots, stabbings, hangings, but the kitchen, he said, was worse. At dawn, the chow hall came alive with a kind of mechanical cruelty. Steam pipes hissed through cracked ceilings, roaches darted across the floor, and trays clattered as inmates shuffled forward, eyes dull, shoulders hunched. The menu was the same as always: gray stew, pale potatoes, and a smell that made stomachs churn before the first bite. The cooks, most of them inmates themselves, worked behind wire mesh screens. They stirred pots with broom handles, laughing bitterly when the meat chunks turned green in the water. "That ain't food," one said. "That's punishment." When inmate Marcus Red Hill collapsed near the chow line one morning in 2019, clutching his stomach and vomiting blood, no one was surprised. The guards called medical. Medical didn't come. Red lay there for nearly 20 minutes before someone dragged him to the infirmary. By noon, word spread across the yard: food poisoning may be worse. The next day, a rumor started circulating: Red wasn't the first. He was the third inmate in 2 months to end up in the hospital after eating stew from H Block kitchen. The administration denied it. But inside San Quentin, rumors moved faster than official memos. The investigation begins. Officer Larkin, disgusted but cautious, started keeping note. Every night, he'd jot down what he saw: mold on bread again. Hot dogs slimy, smell sour. 2 trays tossed before inspection. He wasn't an idealist, just tired of the hypocrisy. He'd seen state inspectors breeze through the kitchen, nodding politely, taking quick notes, and walking out before the first tray was even served. He'd seen the warden boast to journalists about improved nutrition and cleanliness. But Larkin knew better. He'd seen the maggots under the sink. He'd seen inmates forced to eat spoiled beans when deliveries ran short. Then came the night of February 12th. The freezer broke. For 3 days, the meat sat at unsafe temperatures. The maintenance crew logged it. The kitchen supervisor ignored it. And when Friday came, the stew still went out on time. That weekend, 7 inmates fell violently ill. 3 were transferred to outside hospitals. And suddenly, San Quentin had a crisis it couldn't hide. A whistleblower's warning. Inmate Daniel Tex Ramirez, a kitchen worker with 6 months left on his sentence, decided to speak. He wrote a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, to the prison law office, even to the governor's office, detailing what he called criminal negligence in food service. He described kitchen staff forced to serve meat that smelled like death, vegetables with live worms, and gravy so rancid it made eyes water. The letter never reached the paper. It was intercepted in the mailroom, flagged for security reasons. But copies survived, smuggled out by another inmate who worked laundry. Within weeks, the story leaked online. A journalist named Karen Holt picked it up. A veteran of prison reform reporting, she'd covered everything from guard brutality at Corcoran to medical neglect in Chino. The email she received from the anonymous source chilled her. Check San Quentin's kitchen logs between Jan-Mar 2019. Look for missing inspection report. They're hiding something worse than spoiled food. The missing logs. Holt filed a public records request. Days turned into weeks, then months. When the documents finally arrived, entire pages were blacked out. The freezer failure report was missing. Internal memos were redacted. Still, a few fragments slipped through, handwritten notes from a maintenance technician, unsigned but damning. Walk-in unit still out. Supervisor ordered staff to serve meat anyway. Asked to dump spoiled beans, was told to mix with rice to mask odor. Holt tried contacting prison officials for comment. They refused, citing ongoing internal review. But she wasn't the only one asking questions. The prison law office, already investigating medical neglect at San Quentin, had received multiple complaints from inmates about foodborne illness. One affidavit read, "I got sick 3 times in 1 month. The stew looked gray, smelled like wet dog. When I told the CO, he said, 'You don't have to eat it.'" A hidden agenda. What Holt didn't know yet was that a quiet internal audit had already taken place months earlier, one the public would never see. The Department of Corrections' own inspectors had found widespread food safety violations, but the report was buried after union officials protested. Releasing it, they claimed, would jeopardize staff safety. Meanwhile, Officer Larkin was warned to stop stirring trouble. He was reassigned to tower duty, far from the kitchen, far from evidence. His notes disappeared from his locker. When he filed a grievance, it vanished too. He realized the problem wasn't neglect, it was deliberate. Keeping costs low meant cutting corners, ignoring maintenance, and serving whatever could be scraped together. With California's prison budget strained, food became the first casualty. And then, something unexpected happened. The kitchen supervisor, a veteran named Mitchell, was found unconscious in his office. Overdose, they said. But when Larkin saw the scene before paramedics arrived, he noticed something strange. The man's coffee mug was shattered on the floor, his lips blue. An inmate working cleanup whispered later, that coffee wasn't just coffee. The twist in the pot. Karen Holt returned to San Quentin for a second round of interviews. This time, she met with an ex-inmate named Calvin Brooks, recently paroled. Calvin had spent 3 years in the kitchen and kept copies of meal requisition forms hidden in a Bible. What he showed her turned the investigation upside down. According to those forms, hundreds of pounds of donated food, fresh produce, frozen chicken, dairy, had been marked received but never logged as served. The paper trail ended abruptly, as if the food had vanished. Holt's stomach turned. Someone was stealing it. Either guards or outside suppliers were funneling prison food into black market resale, while inmates ate mold. It wasn't just neglect, it was a scheme. The smell returns weeks later, another incident. A shipment of meat arrived with the seal broken. 2 days later, the prison yard filled with the smell again, the same one from H Block, thick and sour. That evening, Red Hill, recovered but frail, wrote a note to another inmate. It said, "It's not the food that's killing us. It's the people feeding us." When Karen Holt got wind of it, she pushed to publish. The Chronicle hesitated, sources too risky, verification incomplete. But before the editors could decide, Holt received an unmarked envelope. Inside were 3 photographs, a freezer door covered in mold, a delivery truck with its logo scratched out, a tray of stew, gray, bubbling, with something that looked like a human tooth floating on top. And beneath them, a single handwritten line, "You're getting too close." End of Chapter 1. Cliffhanger. Holt stared at the photos, her hands trembling. The smell she'd tried to forget, the same smell from San Quentin's kitchen, seemed to linger in the air around her. Outside her apartment, an engine started. Headlights flashed once, then twice. She wasn't sure if it was paranoia or a warning. Either way, she knew, someone inside San Quentin didn't want the truth coming out. And whatever was rotting in that kitchen wasn't just food. The missing shipments. Karen Holt didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the images came back. The gray stew, the mold-covered freezer door, and that single tooth floating in the bowl like a silent accusation. The photos had no markings, no sender's address. But they'd been taken inside San Quentin's kitchen. Only someone with access could have taken them. By morning, her inbox was flooded with messages from anonymous accounts, some offering information, others warning her to drop the story before it's too late. She drove to the Chronicle's office before sunrise. Her editor, Robert Lane, waited with a cup of stale coffee and the weary look of a man balancing truth and consequence. "They called last night," he said. "Corrections Department. They know you're digging again." Karen leaned forward. "Then they know why I can't stop." Lane sighed. "You're walking into something deeper than bad food, Karen. You need proof that sticks. Without it, this story dies, and maybe you with it." The missing shipments. Her next lead came from a forgotten corner of bureaucracy, the California Department of General Services, which handled state supply contracts. Using a combination of leaked documents and old inspection forms, Karen found a pattern. San Quentin's food orders didn't match the deliveries. Invoices showed full shipments, meat, vegetables, dairy, but receiving logs often reflected less than half. The rest? Marked as damaged or discarded. Yet no disposal reports existed. Someone was stealing food, hundreds of pounds a month, and replacing it with garbage unfit for dogs, let alone humans. Karen traced one recurring supplier, North Coast Produce and Logistics, a company with a spotless record and a lucrative contract to supply several California prisons. When she tried to call, the line went dead after 2 rings. When she emailed, the message bounced back. The company's address led to a closed warehouse in Oakland. It didn't exist anymore, at least not legally. Inside the walls. Meanwhile, Officer David Larkin was counting down the days until retirement. But San Quentin wouldn't let him go quietly. Ever since his reassignment, he'd been under watch, cell checks, random inspections, and a supervisor who reminded him that gossiping with journalists violated policy. But Larkin had already made his choice. He met Karen in a gas station parking lot off Highway 37, near the prison's fog-covered hills. The night was cold, mist clinging to the asphalt. He kept his hands in his jacket pockets, eyes darting around. "Do you know what happens to guards who talk?" he muttered. "I know what happens to inmates who eat that food," Karen replied. He handed her a small notebook, wrapped in a fast food bag. "Freezer logs. I made copies before they took the originals." Karen flipped through the pages. Every entry was dated, initialed, and cross-referenced to shipment numbers. Then she saw it, repeated lines written in shaky handwriting. "Shipment received but not unloaded. Supervisor Mitchell signed off. No inventory recorded. Truck left within 30 minutes, empty, supposedly." "Those trucks," Larkin whispered, "they come in full, leave half empty. No one questions it. Sometimes the seals are broken before inspection." Karen frowned. "You think it's theft?" Larkin shook his head. "Not just theft. Someone's making money off what's missing. The black market trail." 2 days later, Karen met with a former inmate named Carlos Nunez. Paroled after 8 years, he now worked at a non-profit that helped ex-offenders reintegrate. When Karen mentioned food corruption, Carlos's face went pale. "I've seen it," he said. "Guys in the kitchen trade expired food to the guards. Guards sell it outside. The meat that's supposed to be dumped? It ends up in roadside diners and corner stores. Same boxes, same codes." Karen blinked. "Are you saying prison food is being sold to the public?" Carlos nodded. "Ever eat at those $2 breakfast joints by the highway? Check the labels on their frozen beef. Sometimes they still have DOC stamps." He paused, lowering his voice. "And if anyone inside tries to expose it, they end up in ADSEG. Or worse." Karen's heart pounded. She had her next lead, but it came with danger. She decided to follow the paper trail through the state's procurement system. The shadow account. The deeper she dug, the stranger it got. The Department of Corrections food budget showed a $2.8 million annual allocation for San Quentin alone. but only $2 million was accounted for. The rest vanished into a vague entry labeled Special Maintenance Reserve. When Karen cross-referenced the account number, it led to a private intermediary, Bayco Distribution LLC. A shell company formed 2 years earlier, owned by someone named Michael Vaughn. Vaughn had been a procurement officer in the Department of Corrections until 2016, when he retired early. After that, he started Bayco. Within months, the company began supplying food to the same prisons he once managed. And the most profitable contract? San Quentin. Karen's hands trembled as she printed the records. It wasn't just neglect anymore. It was organized corruption, state money funneled through private hands while inmates starved. But before she could publish, something unexpected happened. A sudden death. The same night Karen pulled Vaughn's records, Officer Larkin's phone went dark. His daughter reported him missing. The next morning, his car was found near the Marin shoreline, driver's door open, keys still in the ignition. Inside, police found his ID, a torn photograph of his family, and a copy of Karen's business card. No wallet. No phone. Authorities ruled it a probable suicide. But Karen didn't buy it. She'd spoken to him just 2 nights earlier. He was nervous, yes, but hopeful. He'd even said, "When this blows up, maybe they'll finally clean that kitchen." Now he was gone. And the timing was too perfect. Inside the warden's office, Karen requested an official comment from Warden Alan Reese. The meeting was arranged under strict conditions. No cameras, no recordings, only handwritten notes. Reese, a tall man with a cold stare, didn't bother hiding his irritation. "Ms. Holt," he said, "you're chasing ghosts. The kitchen passed all inspections. Food quality meets state guidelines." "Then explain the illnesses," Karen shot back. "The missing shipments. The freezer logs." He smiled faintly. "You're basing that on what, an ex-con's word?" A disgruntled officer who couldn't handle his post. Karen leaned forward. "And what about the supplier Bayco? The shell company that replaced North Coast?" Reese froze for a fraction of a second, barely perceptible, but enough. Then he smirked. "I think we're done here." As she left, an aide whispered quietly, "Be careful, Ms. Holt." The last reporter who went after a DOC contractor ended up losing everything. The warning. That night, Karen returned home to find her apartment door ajar. Nothing stolen, just rearranged. Her files, her notes, even her backup drives, all moved. On the kitchen table, someone had left a single cafeteria tray. Gray plastic. And on it, a sealed container marked property of CDCR, San Quentin Food Services. Inside, cold stew. Same color, same smell. A sticky note on top read, "We told you, stop feeding the story." A new ally. Fear gave way to fury. Karen took the tray straight to a private lab for testing. The results came back within days. Traces of Listeria, E. coli, and rodent droppings, all consistent with contaminated storage and improper sanitation. She now had scientific proof that the food at San Quentin wasn't just bad, it was toxic. Desperate for backup, she reached out to Dr. Andrea Liu, a public health expert who'd investigated outbreaks in state facilities. Dr. Liu agreed to help on one condition: anonymity. "I've warned them for years," Liu said over a secure call. "They won't fix it because it's not broken for them. The less they spend, the more they pocket." Karen asked the question that had been haunting her since the start. If they know inmates are getting sick, why not stop it? Liu's answer was chilling. Because in their eyes, those men stopped mattering the moment they stepped inside. The leak. With Larkin gone and the warden stonewalling, Karen decided to go public. She compiled everything. The logs, the invoices, the photos, the lab report, and sent it to a trusted contact at the state's watchdog agency. 3 days later, her story was scheduled to publish. But on the morning of release, the Chronicle's website crashed. The article vanished from the queue. Karen called IT, no answer. Then she called her editor, Lane. He picked up, whispering, "They pulled it. Legal fears retaliation. They say it's under review." Karen's blood ran cold. "Who's they?" Lane hesitated. "The governor's office." The hidden tape, that same evening, a flash drive arrived in her mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single audio file labeled refrigerator. She plugged it in, hit play, and froze. It was a recording, grainy, muffled, but unmistakable. Two voices, both male. Voice 1, "What about the meat from last week?" Voice 2, "Dumped it in Baco's truck. They'll repackage it." Voice 1, "And the warden?" Voice 2, "He gets his cut like always." Karen replayed it again and again. One of the voices, she was sure, belonged to Mitchell, the supervisor who'd overdosed weeks earlier. If that was true, his death wasn't accidental. It was cleanup. Karen knew she had everything she needed to blow the case wide open, evidence of corruption, murder, and systemic cover-up. But she also knew what it meant. People were already disappearing. Files were being erased. And somewhere, deep inside San Quentin's kitchen, someone was still stirring that same pot of stew, laughing quietly at how easily the system swallowed its own rot. Before she could decide what to do next, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text message. "Next delivery comes tonight. You'll want to see it for yourself." A friend inside. Karen stared at the screen. Her reflection glowed faintly in the cracked glass. She grabbed her recorder, her notebook, and her keys. Because whatever was coming into San Quentin that night might finally reveal what was being fed to everyone else. The delivery at midnight. Fog blanketed the bay like a dirty shroud. From the hills above Marin, San Quentin's floodlights sliced through the mist, pale beams sweeping over razor wire and empty watchtowers. The prison slept, but the kitchen never did. Karen Holt sat in her car just beyond the perimeter fence, headlights off, heart hammering. The text message still glowed on her phone. "Next delivery comes tonight. You'll want to see it for yourself." A friend inside. She checked her watch. 11:42 p.m. The air smelled like salt and diesel. Far off, the dull thump of waves echoed against the concrete seawall. Then she heard it, a truck's low growl rising from the highway. It came slow, headlights dimmed, turning off before the main gate. No state markings, no company logo. Just a white refrigerated rig, the kind used to haul produce. Karen lifted her camera, adjusting the lens through the windshield. The guard at the entry shack stepped out, clipboard in hand. For a moment, they spoke. Then the gate rolled open without inspection. No ID check. No search. The truck disappeared inside. The ghost shift. Karen started her engine, driving a wide loop to the maintenance road skirting the backside of the compound. A chain-link fence separated her from the loading bay, but through the fog she saw shadows moving, 3, maybe 4 figures unloading crates under the pale yellow light. She snapped photos. Zoomed in. The crates weren't labeled CDCR property like normal. Instead, bold red stencils read Baco Distribution, the same shell company from her records. But what chilled her most wasn't the logo, it was what she saw next. Workers, 2 inmates and 1 uniformed guard, were dragging black trash bags from the truck, not crates. They carried them to a dumpster behind the kitchen and dumped them fast, looking around as if afraid to be seen. Then, one bag ripped open. Something heavy thudded onto the ground. Karen strained her camera lens. Meat. Raw, gray, and crawling with flies. One of the inmates cursed and kicked the spill back into the bin. The guard barked something she couldn't hear. The men hurried faster, disappearing back into the truck. Minutes later, it was gone, swallowed by fog. Breaking in. Karen's hands shook as she reviewed the photos. Her gut screamed to leave. to drive straight back to the city, call it in, let someone else risk their life. But then she remembered Officer Larkin's daughter crying over the phone, begging for answers. She couldn't stop now. She parked near the maintenance gate, grabbed her press badge, and clipped a small GoPro under her jacket. Through the fence, she spotted a side service door propped open by a crate. It led into the laundry wing, adjacent to the kitchen loading area. She waited until the guard disappeared into the distance. Then she moved quiet, low, fast. Inside, the air changed instantly, humid, foul, thick with ammonia. The hum of old fluorescent lights vibrated overhead. Somewhere nearby, water dripped in slow, steady rhythm. She crept past stacked bins of soiled uniforms and followed the corridor toward the kitchen. When she turned the corner, she froze. A man stood by the walk-in freezer, his back to her, flashlight flickering as he scribbled on a clipboard. His uniform said Food Services Supervisor, but the name patch was torn off. Karen held her breath, filming from behind a supply cart. The man opened the freezer door, and for a second she caught a glimpse inside. Rows of stacked boxes wrapped in plastic, each one marked inspection wave. Then she saw something that didn't belong. Near the bottom corner of the freezer, under the flickering light, was a human hand. The discovery. Karen bit her tongue to keep from gasping. The hand was gray, swollen, fingertips blackened with decay. It protruded from a pile of thawing meat. The man with the flashlight didn't even flinch. He checked the temperature gauge, scribbled another note, and closed the door as if nothing was wrong. Karen stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a tray of utensils. The sound echoed. The supervisor spun around. "Who's there?" Karen ducked behind the cart, heart slamming. He stepped closer, his boots squeaking on the wet floor. "Who the hell?" Before he finished, a siren wailed somewhere down the hall. He cursed, turned, and ran toward the noise. Karen took her chance. She darted forward, shoved open the freezer door, and aimed her camera. Cold air punched her face. Inside, the boxes were labeled with fake inventory codes. Bacolot number 42, number 43, number 44, but beneath them lay the truth. Half-rotted meat, some slabs shaped wrong, too pale, too thin. Her flashlight hit the floor, and she saw it clearly now. The hand wasn't alone. There were two. Flight through the halls. Karen stumbled back, fighting nausea. She'd seen photos of decay before, crime scene evidence from old cases, but never like this. Never this close. The sirens grew louder. Shouts echoed through the corridor. She bolted, turning down the laundry wing, her shoes slipping on the wet floor. Flashlights flickered behind her. Guards yelling, "Stop! Who's there?" She ducked into a side room marked custodial supply. The air reeked of bleach and dust. She hid behind a shelf, pressing a hand over her mouth as footsteps thundered past the door. Through a small window, she saw 3 officers run by, one of them carrying a radio. "Lock down the kitchen," someone shouted. "We got a breach." Karen waited until the voices faded, then slipped out a back door that led to the yard. She climbed through a gap in the fence, tearing her jacket, and crawled into the night. By the time she reached her car, her hands were trembling so badly she dropped the keys twice before the engine turned over. She drove blind through the fog, headlights off, until the prison lights vanished behind her. The evidence. At a motel 20 miles away, Karen backed up the footage. The video was shaky, blurred from panic, but it was clear enough. The freezer. The boxes. The exposed hands. And faintly in the background, a man's voice near the end, low, raspy, saying words that made her blood freeze. "Take it to Baco. They'll grind the rest tomorrow. Grind the rest." She rewound, playing it again. The implication hit like ice. If the meat shipments were being mixed and recycled, what exactly were the inmates eating? She emailed the file to her editor with a single line. "This is bigger than corruption. Call me ASAP." Then she fell asleep, fully dressed, clutching the camera in her hand. The call that changed everything. She woke to the sound of knocking, hard, rapid, impatient. Her phone said 6:07 a.m. She peeked through the blinds. A man stood outside the door, mid-40s, wearing a plain jacket, no badge visible. "Ms. Holt," he called. "I'm with the State Investigations Bureau. We need to talk." Karen hesitated. "Show me your ID." He slid a card under the door. It looked real enough, embossed seal, signature, photo. She unlocked the chain halfway. "You're with the Bureau?" "Yes, ma'am. You've been working on the San Quentin story. We believe your life's in danger." Her pulse spiked. "From who?" He glanced toward the parking lot. "Not who, what? There are shipments moving across 3 facilities now. Pelican Bay, Corcoran, San Quentin. Same contracts, same supplier. You've touched a nerve, Ms. Holt. You need to hand everything over." Karen frowned. "Why would I do that?" He smiled thinly. "Because if you don't, someone else will take it, and they won't ask as nicely." Before she could reply, his expression shifted. He looked past her shoulder, toward the nightstand. "You sent the footage already?" Karen stiffened. "How did you know about that?" His smile vanished. She saw it then, the glint of metal at his waist. The attack. Karen slammed the door, locking it fast. The man pounded once, then twice. "Ms. Holt, you're making a mistake." She backed toward the window, grabbed her bag, and kicked open the bathroom vent. Her hands shook as she crawled through, falling into the alley behind the motel. Tires screeched. A black sedan at the curb roared to life. She sprinted across the street, ducking into a diner just as the car sped past, tinted windows rolling down, but no shots fired. She collapsed into a booth, gasping. The waitress stared, confused. "You okay, honey?" Karen forced a nod. "Coffee. Black. And, can I use your payphone?" A voice from inside. She dialed the only number she could trust, Dr. Andrea Liu. When Liu answered, her tone was grim. "Karen, don't come back to San Francisco. They're scrubbing files. The department issued a media blackout this morning, pending security review." Karen's throat tightened. "They're killing the story. They're killing anyone tied to it," Liu said. "I just got word. An inmate named Ramirez died last night. Food poisoning, they said." Karen froze. Daniel Tex Ramirez, the kitchen worker who'd written the whistleblower letter. Liu's voice cracked through the static. "He was found in the freezer." The connection. Karen stared at the phone, unable to speak. The pieces started clicking into place like a lock snapping shut. The missing shipments. The fake supplier. The warden's cut. And now, bodies hidden in food storage. It wasn't just theft or negligence. It was something darker. Something organized. Maybe the spoiled meat wasn't just spoiled. Maybe it was mixed. Karen felt her stomach twist. The idea was unthinkable, impossible, and yet the footage didn't lie. "Grind the rest tomorrow," she whispered. "My God, they're feeding the dead to the living." Liu's voice broke. "Get out while you can." Karen ended the call, hands trembling so hard she nearly dropped the receiver. Outside, dawn crept over the bay, painting the water in bruised shades of gray and red. She opened her laptop to check her email, but her inbox was empty. Her files were gone. Her footage deleted. All that remained was a single new message. No subject line. No sender. Just one sentence: "We cleaned the kitchen." And attached, a still frame from her own video. The freezer door open. The hands gone. The cover up. Karen Holt didn't remember leaving the diner. One moment she was staring at that email, the words "We cleaned the kitchen" burning across the laptop screen like a scar, and the next she was sitting in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel hard enough to whiten her knuckles. Outside, morning fog rolled over the highway like smoke from an invisible fire. The world felt slower now, muffled, as if reality itself had started to corrode. Her files were gone. The footage deleted. Even the backups on her external drives had vanished. Whoever had sent that message hadn't just broken into her system, they were inside her life. The bureaucratic silence. By noon, the Chronicle newsroom was in chaos. Her editor, Lane, was gone, his desk cleared, his nameplate removed. The receptionist said he'd taken an indefinite leave. No one knew why, or maybe no one dared to ask. Karen logged onto her workstation. Access denied. Her credentials had been revoked. When she tried calling HR, the line redirected to legal. A woman's voice answered, measured and polite. Ms. Holt, your credentials are suspended pending review. Please refrain from contacting any current employees until your case is resolved. Resolved? Karen asked, voice breaking. What case? Your employment status and your involvement in ongoing state investigations. Then the line went dead. The state had moved faster than any newsroom bureaucracy ever could. That meant one thing: the department was scared. The disappearing evidence. Karen still had one thing they didn't: her printed copies of the invoices and inspection forms. She'd left them in a storage unit outside Oakland, just in case. When she arrived, the padlock was broken. Inside, the unit was empty. Every file, every notebook, every box gone. In their place, lying neatly in the center of the floor, was a single cafeteria tray. Same gray plastic. Same faint smell of bleach and meat. And this time, a folded newspaper rested on top. It was that morning's edition of the San Francisco Herald. The front page headline read, San Quentin Whistleblower Fabricated Claims, Officials Say. Beneath it, a photo of her. Karen stared at the image, disbelief and fury mixing in her chest. They'd turned her story inside out. In less than 24 hours, they'd painted her as the villain, a disgraced reporter spreading lies to discredit the correctional system. The article quoted sources close to the investigation, claiming she'd falsified emails and hacked state servers. There was even a warrant for her questioning. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number again. She answered before thinking. Karen Holt. The voice was calm, official, male. This is Detective Ralston with the State Bureau. You need to come in. We'd prefer not to make a scene. She hung up without replying. They weren't coming to question her. They were coming to erase her. An unexpected ally. By sunset, she was in hiding, an abandoned boathouse on the far end of the bay, borrowed from an old source in environmental reporting. The air reeked of salt and mildew, and the floorboards moaned with every step. She sat by the cracked window, scrolling through the offline copy of her email, one the hackers hadn't touched. And then, buried in her spam folder, she found it. A message from a friend inside. No text. Just a video attachment. She clicked it. The shaky footage showed the same kitchen she'd filmed days earlier, but this time, daylight streamed through the windows. Inmates worked quietly at the counters. The camera tilted toward the walk-in freezer, now spotless, restocked, gleaming under fluorescent light. A man's voice whispered behind the lens. They cleaned it all. Took the boxes. Moved everything to Stockton facility. Check Baco's trucks tonight. Lot numbers changed to Series 9. Then the video cut out. Karen replayed it twice, noting every frame. Stockton facility. That was a medium security complex east of the bay, used mostly for overflow transfers. If the operation had shifted there, it meant the corruption wasn't isolated to San Quentin. It was statewide. The political machine. The next morning, a press conference aired live from Sacramento. Karen watched on a motel TV, volume low. At the podium stood director Michael Vaughn, the same man she'd traced as the owner of Baco Distribution. Now, in a neatly pressed suit, he introduced himself as the acting head of Correctional Supply Management. Reporters clapped politely. Cameras flashed. He smiled and said, "We take these allegations seriously. But internal reviews confirm that all food services meet the highest federal standard. Recent stories circulating online are false, malicious, and harmful to public trust." He didn't mention her by name, but he didn't have to. Everyone watching knew who recent stories meant. Behind him, Warden Reese stood stiffly, jaw tight. Karen noticed something odd. The warden didn't look relieved. He looked cornered. And next to him stood a woman Karen had never seen before, a state senator, Elaine Masters, chair of the Corrections Oversight Committee. She stepped to the microphone and said, "Transparency is our priority. We're launching a full review." But her tone was too polished, too rehearsed. It wasn't a review. It was damage control. The hidden documents. Karen knew she had one last shot. Before her files were wiped, she'd emailed backup copies to a confidential storage drive registered under a pseudonym. She hadn't accessed it in weeks, but it might still hold what she needed. She booted up her old laptop, disconnected from the internet, and opened the drive. One folder survived, Q Records. Inside were 5 PDF scans of inspection forms and supply chain invoices. But something was strange, the signatures. Each one bore the name, Michael Vaughn. And each signature looked identical, down to the pixel. They weren't signed by hand, they were stamped. Forgery. That was the crack she needed. If she could prove the signatures were fake, she could show the contracts themselves were fraudulent, and that Vaughn had personally authorized them while serving as both supplier and auditor. A perfect self-feeding loop. The visit. She was halfway through copying the files when she heard footsteps outside the boathouse. Soft. Careful. Not law enforcement heavy boots, lighter, deliberate. Karen closed the laptop and killed the light. The door creaked open. A beam of light swept across the room. "Karen," a voice whispered. "It's Andrea." Karen exhaled in relief and stood. "You scared the hell out of me, Doctor." Lou stepped inside, pulling down her hood. Her face was pale, eyes red from lack of sleep. "They know I helped you," she said. "I'm being followed." "I burned my notes." Karen frowned. "Then why come here?" Lou hesitated. "Because I had to show you this." She pulled out a folder, edges singed as if it had narrowly escaped a fire. Inside were copies of toxicology reports from the state health department. Every test listed the same result. Traces of human DNA found in meat samples from 3 prisons, San Quentin, Corcoran, and Stockton. Karen's breath caught. "So it's true." Lou nodded. "They blend the waste. Biodegradable disposal, they call it. Only there's nothing biodegradable about what they're doing. The trap." Before they could speak again, the phone on the counter buzzed. Unknown number. Karen and Lou stared at it. The ringing stopped. Then it buzzed again, this time a message. "We know where you are. Don't make us come inside." Outside, tires crunched on gravel. Headlights swept across the windows. Karen yanked the hard drive from her laptop, slipped it into her pocket, and nodded to Lou. "Back door." Now. They slipped into the rain, running along the shoreline. Behind them, the boathouse door burst open. 2 silhouettes stepped inside, flashlights scanning, weapons drawn. Lou tripped on the rocks. Karen pulled her up, heart pounding. They reached a service road and ducked behind an abandoned truck as the lights approached. Engines idled nearby. Voices shouted. "Search the perimeter. Director wants it clean tonight." Karen froze. Director. They meant Vaughn. He wasn't hiding behind titles anymore. He was running the cleanup himself. A desperate decision. They waited until the voices faded, then climbed into the old truck's cab. The keys weren't there, but Karen found a screwdriver in the glove box. Lou stared. "You don't know how to hotwire a car." Karen gave a humorless laugh. "I do now." The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. They sped down the coastal road, rain slapping the windshield, headlights off. Behind them, faint sirens echoed through the night. Karen gripped the wheel. We need to get these files to someone who can't be bought. Who? Lou asked. Karen hesitated. Federal level. Outside California. Maybe the Justice Department. Lou frowned. They'll bury it too. You need visibility, public pressure. You need it out in the open. Karen's mind raced. If I die, promise me you'll leak it. Lou looked at her. If you die, they'll erase me next. They reached a gas station on the edge of Vallejo just before dawn. Karen parked behind a dumpster and plugged her hard drive into a pay-per-use laptop inside the convenience store. She began uploading the files to an encrypted server, one used by whistleblowers and investigative journalists across the country. Progress bar, 22%, 41%, 67%. Then the screen flashed. Upload failed. Connection interrupted. Karen cursed under her breath, trying again. The doorbell jingled as someone entered the store. Boots echoed on the tile. She turned her head. A man in a dark coat stood by the counter, pretending to browse gum. But his reflection in the glass door showed the unmistakable bulge of a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. Karen whispered, "Andrea, run." Lou didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on something behind Karen. Karen turned, too late. A second man stood by the exit, blocking their way. He smiled. Director Vaughn sends his regards. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Karen's hand hovered over the laptop's Send All button. The upload bar flickered, then jumped suddenly to 99%. The man stepped closer. Walk away, Ms. Holt, or you'll disappear just like the rest. Karen met his eyes, jaw tight. Then I'll make sure everyone sees it first. She slammed her palm on send. The man lunged forward. The screen went black. A gunshot echoed through the rain-soaked parking lot. The last broadcast. Rain hammered the roof of the gas station like gunfire. The single fluorescent light above the counter flickered, buzzing faintly, painting everything in sickly white. Karen Holt lay motionless behind the checkout counter, breath shallow, her hand still outstretched toward the laptop. The metallic tang of blood mixed with the smell of burnt plastic. The bullet had missed her heart, but the shock left her half-conscious. The man who'd fired stood frozen, gun smoking, eyes wide. The laptop screen glowed faintly in the dim light, upload complete, before flickering to black. 1,000 miles away, on a secure network used by independent journalists, a new anonymous post appeared. Inside San Quentin, the real story they tried to bury, with 132 encrypted attachments. The files were live. The fallout. By sunrise, the leaks had spread like wildfire. Newsrooms from Los Angeles to London were scrambling to verify what they were seeing. Contracts, inspection photos, DNA test results, autopsy reports. And one image stood out above all others, a still from Karen's footage, the walk-in freezer, the swollen gray hands visible among stacks of meat. Cable news anchors whispered the words, "Human remains." Social media boiled over with disbelief and horror. Protesters gathered outside California's Department of Corrections headquarters before noon. Governor's office statements called the footage fabricated. Vaughn appeared on camera, denying everything, his face calm but his voice cracking at the edges. But it didn't matter anymore. The truth was loose. The hospital room. Karen woke in a haze of pain and antiseptic. Her right shoulder was bandaged, 4 lines snaking into her arm. Rain beat softly against the window. A uniformed officer stood at the foot of her bed, expression unreadable. "You're lucky," he said quietly. "Bullet missed the artery. The other one didn't make it." Her breath caught. "Dr. Lou." He nodded. Karen looked away, blinking back tears. The machines beside her beeped steadily, indifferent. "They said you uploaded state property," the officer continued. "But there's talk higher up. The feds want your files. Whatever you sent, it's shaking the whole system. Karen turned her head slowly. They can have the files. I just want her name remembered. The officer hesitated, then whispered, for what it's worth. I think you did the right thing. The collapse. By the second day, the storm had reached Washington. Federal investigators seized the department's record. Vaughn was taken into custody for questioning, though no one doubted what that meant. Warden Reese resigned. A quiet statement released overnight said he was cooperating with authorities. Within a week, 2 contractors connected to Baco were found dead, one in an apparent car accident, another by suicide. But beneath the headlines, the real horror was only beginning to surface. A leaked forensic report confirmed what Karen had feared since Chapter 3. The contaminated meat from multiple California prisons contained trace elements of human DNA. The victims were likely unregistered deceased inmates, their remains illegally disposed of through the prison food supply chain. Public outrage exploded. Lawsuits piled up. Federal hearings were announced. And yet, amid the chaos, Karen lay in silence, watching it unfold from a hospital bed, unsure whether to feel vindicated or haunted. The broadcast 3 weeks later, an independent journalist collective reached out to her. They wanted to produce a documentary based on her investigation. She hesitated. The nightmares hadn't stopped, the freezer door, the smell of rot, Lou's terrified eyes. But then she remembered something Larkin had once said, if no one tells it, they'll just bury it again. So she agreed. They filmed the interview in her apartment, lights dim, camera close. She wore a simple gray sweater, her voice calm but raw. When people think of San Quentin, they imagine walls, violence, punishment. But what they don't see is the system behind it, the rot that starts at the top and trickles down until human life means nothing. She paused, eyes distant. They said the food was the problem. It wasn't. The food was the symptom. The disease was greed. The interviewer asked softly, "And what did it cost you?" Karen smiled sadly. "Everything worth losing." The Reckoning, the documentary, aired 6 months later under the title The Last Broadcast, Inside San Quentin's Dark Kitchen. It reached over 40 million views within a week. International headlines followed. The UN Human Rights Council opened an inquiry into U.S. prison conditions. Michael Vaughn faced multiple federal charges: fraud, tampering with evidence, and crimes against humanity. He denied it all, insisting the footage was doctored. But a single piece of evidence destroyed his defense: the recovered voice recording from the refrigerator flash drive. What about the meat from last week? Dumped it in Baco's truck. They'll repackage it. And the warden? He gets his cut like always. The jury didn't take long. Vaughn was sentenced to life without parole. The ghost in the system months later, reforms swept through the prison network. Independent food audits became law. San Quentin's kitchen was torn down and rebuilt from scratch. But even after justice, something lingered, a quiet unease, a question no one wanted to ask out loud. How many others had disappeared into that system before anyone noticed? Late one night, Karen sat in her apartment watching the ocean fog drift past her window. The city was quiet now, distant sirens blending with the hum of traffic. Her shoulder still ached when it rained. She reached for her phone. One new message. No number. They cleaned San Quentin. But Stockton's still cooking. She stared at the screen, pulse quickening. Part of her wanted to delete it, to finally rest, to move on. But she knew she wouldn't. She opened a new notebook, wrote one line across the top: "Inside Stockton, the second kitchen." And beneath it, she added a single note from memory, Larkin's old words, scrawled years before in a grease-stained logbook: "Rot doesn't stop when the lights come on. It hides deeper." Karen looked out the window, fog swallowing the horizon. Then she whispered into the dark, half a promise, half a warning, Let's feed the truth to the world again.